Change my heart, oh God. Make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God. May I be like you. Change my heart, oh God. Make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God. May I be like you. You are the change my heart, oh God. Make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God. May I be like you. You are the change my heart, oh God. Make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God. May I be like you.
Hi, James.
Hi, Clarence.
How are you?
Great, nice to see you again.
Likewise. Where are you?
I'm in UK, in Norwich.
Ah, all right. It's home leave time, right?
Yes, and I've really enjoyed it. I've put on a few kilos with the cooking of my parents.
And how often do you get to go home?
Usually once every 4 years when you're in another continent. Because normally last time we spoke in our podcast, I was in Manila. That's where I'm assigned. And I hope to be going back there soon.
Ah, right. Okay. So you're back home with mom and dad?
Yes, mum and dad, and my younger brother's actually staying. His name is Daniel. So it's great to be, although we're on quite a strict lockdown in UK, as you know. So, but otherwise enjoying.
So mom and dad must be quite happy to have you back.
Yes, very happy to see their beloved son. How about you? How are you doing?
Yeah, it's the same, James. I mean, we are just going through also similar lockdowns. We were open, we were closed like the last time when we talked. Yeah, so we are in a little bit of a lockdown, but not as strict as the first one. So the situation seems to be escalating. So we do not really know where we are headed. What are we looking at in the coming months or the coming days also? I mean, we're not too sure. Things are a bit difficult, So I mean, so travel is very difficult. I miss traveling though. You must be very brave to have traveled back home. I mean, from Manila back to the UK. in the height of the pandemic. How was that?
Well, I booked my flight for December 8th. So as we know, that's a special day, Mother Mary's feast and the Immaculate Conception. So I thought I'll leave it in her hands. And I got home fine. Of course, there was a particular moment when I was able to travel. After that, there was a travel ban. So the Philippines had a travel ban, and rightly so, because it was concerned. But the travel ban is now being lifted. So it kind of providentially worked out fine. And, you know, as long as you take precautions on the flight, you have to wear your mask and a shield and hand washing, social distancing. So.
Oh, okay. All right. So how was Christmas home? I mean, I don't think you get to go home for Christmas very often, do you? I mean, this must be a rare occasion that you got home for Christmas.
Second time in 20 years. So, yes, of course, it's lovely to be. Christmas is a special time. And I also enjoy spending Christmas with my community. But it's different to be, in that sense, at home. For example, in the Philippines, the Christmas is usually a bit warmer. And they have what's called Noche Buena, which comes from the Spanish culture, which is like a meal quite late on December 24. Whereas, you know, the British culture is more the 25th is the lunch. So, and it's usually colder than Manila. So some differences. But still, baby Jesus is born. The same baby Jesus, Manila, London, KL.
Yeah, probably with thicker swaddling clothes in the UK than in the Philippines for baby Jesus. Yeah, to keep him away from the cold.
Thermal lining, yes.
When were you here the last time, James? We met when? What, 2 years ago? You were in KL?
Yes. From our Verbum Dei mission in the Philippines, I was going to Malaysia around once a year over the last 7 to 8 years. I went with different priests and sometimes with the sisters, also Verbum Dei. So to KL, sometimes also to Miri. We've been also to KK and the birthplace of, my goodness, I've forgotten the city.
Malacca.
Yes, Malacca. Well done. Thanks,
Francis Xavier.
Do it in a dialogue because it comes across, you know, what one doesn't say, the other fills in. So thanks, bro.
Right. That's nice. James, I mean, you know, the last time when you were here, of course, you and I studied both in the same postgraduate school, and we have met several times, and we've built a friendship over the years of meeting in different conferences. We don't meet in Asia. Very often we meet outside of Asia. When was the last before that? We met in before coming here. It was in Sarajevo in Bosnia, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So then we met in Bangalore. You know, and we are often talking about, you know, things that are happening in the world, and both of us studied moral theology. You know, I thought we'd just have a conversation. I mean, just exchange ideas about what's happening in the world this time. You know, lots of challenges, lots of difficulties, lots and lots of questions out there. You know, I've been getting questions. I'm sure you have been getting questions. You know, and interestingly, you know, when the last time when you were here 2 years ago, if you remember, in my office, I was actually writing a response to a newspaper question about vaccinations. I don't know whether you remember that conversation. Yeah, and you know, we had to make. It was nice to consult you and just to get somebody to bounce it off, you know, about vaccination and what is the position of the church, you know, and we talked about it quite a bit. And the question, the question has come back again, you know, now with COVID. Of course, the context is different. You know, when we were talking about vaccinations in general, you know, we talked about, you know, the idea of protecting human life, and you know, I was thinking, you know, I think the church holds, right. I mean, the very basic principle of life is that, you know, life is sacred. You know, it's something that we want to protect at all costs. And that must be, that's a principle that we all learned, I guess. I'm not sure. I mean, when you were in Alfonsianum, what year were you there, James? I forgot you were.
I was there 2006 until 2008.
Yeah, so just after I had left, and I'm sure you remember your bioethics professor Fagioni. I'm sure you were still there.
Maurizio Fagioni.
Yeah. I mean, like the principles of life, I mean, the church holds on to. I mean, what do you think? I mean, in today's world, how does that apply?
I think that most people, we could say, like of goodwill, of good intention, good heart, can grasp the goodness of life, that it's a good thing. For example, it's good to be with your family. It's good to enjoy. I mean, people can probably grasp pretty simply that life is a good. The thing that's challenging is, of course, to apply the principles in concrete situations. Okay, we know it's a good, but what is the good in this situation? And that's one of the things I remember from the teaching of St. Alphonsus Liguori, who, of course, the inspiration behind the Alphonsianum is St. Alphonsus Liguori. He would say one of the most challenging things in decision making, in ethical decision making, is to choose the right principle and then to apply it also. So we know life is a good, but in the concrete situations, what is really the good thing to do? That's where the discussion can come in.
Yeah, I guess, the whole idea of life being sacred also is something that we often talk about. How do you keep that? When I mean, I've had these conversations with many people. We talk about whether it's the quality of life, between the quality and life and the sanctity of life. Where do you find a healthy balance? And sometimes, in different situations, people think that it is just the quality of life, and if the quality of life is not good, it's not worth living. But forgetting that there is the sanctity of life that we often talk about. That life is not a commodity, and life is sacred. I mean, you went to medical school. I'm sure that the Hippocratic oath that you take.
Yeah.
The very basic is, first do no harm. That's what we all remember. I remember at least a little bit of the Latin, primum non nocere, that we were all told about.
Yeah.
But it is hard in this, as you say, it is hard in these times to hold on to that principle, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
that sacredness of life, when everything is looked at in terms of quality, in terms of its usability. How do we hold on to the sacredness of life? It's quite
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah, I think it's good to recognize that it is a challenge, not just to say no, not to make light of it. It is a challenge, but I think that's one of the beautiful things about for example, the Catholic faith, that it does cast light on these difficult areas. That the Catholic faith is not only a prayer and, for example, to light a candle, and of course this can be a wonderful part of the faith, the worship, but there's also a doctrinal teaching side that if we sometimes we don't know where we'd like to look, maybe we just don't know where. But on a lot of these issues of life, of course, the church has been very proactive in sharing its teachings and trying to cast light on these kind of conundrums which we face every day. So I really give thanks for the teachings of the church, and I hope that more and more Catholics, they are interested in them, but more of them can perhaps digest this teaching also and be able to apply it to their own thinking about the problems of today.
I mean, we all, I remember, I mean, at least learning all the principles that are, I mean, we always hold that the principles are not changing, but the context keeps changing. I mean, especially in the medical field, it's the whole idea of how technology has progressed, and health, and, how these principles sometimes are seen as not relevant, or too archaic, or, not up to date, But
Yeah.
I like you say, I mean, some of these principles are eternal. I mean, like, do no harm, protect life. These are very core principles that we hold on to. And I think these are the questions that we are confronted with today in this new challenge, isn't it? I mean, in the world that we live in today. How do we protect life in the time of a pandemic?
Yes. I mean, one thing is that we have to be able to articulate clearly the thinking we have behind it. And as we said, the principles are there. I think it's good to hold on to them and to be able to try to apply them in the different contexts. What is interesting, as we showed earlier, was that this issue, for example, of vaccination, it's come up before. That's why we were discussing it before. There's church teachings that pertain to that area from before. But of course, in the light of the current events, the spotlight is back again on this topic, and the church is returning, and that's why it's giving it more attention. But as we said, it's not the first time it's looked at the issue. but it really is a pressing time to address the pandemic we are in.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, you were saying there's a lot of information going on. I mean, you get all kinds of messages, you get all kinds of videos, sometimes, very conflicting, puts the Catholic in a very difficult position. So maybe we thought this evening we talk a little bit about, the vaccine and the context that we are in. And especially the conversations that are happening among Catholic theologians about the permissibility of vaccination, or can we use a tainted vaccine? These are some of the things that that people are asking. As I said, this is a conversation. A conversation that we are having. So, I don't know whether you have watched this program called "Who Wants to Be a Millionaire." And when you are stuck in this question, you can call a friend, and that's one of those cards. So I thought I brought in another friend this evening, just to bring in Dr. Sharon into a little. Hi, Sharon. Good evening. Sharon, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
All right. Okay. You were muted for a while. How are you? Have you had a dinner?
Not yet. Right after this, Father.
So Father James and I have been talking a little bit about, the context that we are in, how Catholics are a bit conflicted about, the choices that they have to make. Maybe we thought we'd start with just having a conversation about, the vaccines, because that's, at the forefront at the moment. I mean, I'm not, James, you are in the UK, they've already rolled out the vaccine, and here in Malaysia, we are still not very sure when, what, how it's going to happen. But no, if somebody came and asked me, Sharon, I mean, because as priest, we asked, what are the differences between the different vaccinations that we have? If you could give us, kind of a simple understanding of, not so much in the medical sense. James might understand. I may not understand completely.
Yes, sure. So the novel SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus, it's an absolutely new virus, completely new to the human body, and we do not have the adequate. We do not have antibodies at all for this virus. Hence, the need for vaccine. But the story about vaccines has been buzzing so much. Like every day we hear different stories from different parts of the world on the different types of vaccines. So there are actually 4 main types of vaccine. And the one that we have been hearing the most is the mRNA vaccine. So basically it's M for messenger, R for ribonucleic acid. So now it's not a DNA, it's just an RNA. So DNA actually has double strand, whereas the mRNA only has a single strand. So it's like it codes, all right? It's a coding process. So now it's just the RNA from the COVID, the coronavirus, is used to manufacture the vaccine. So what it actually does is when we are given the vaccine, this mRNA stands there and gives instructions to our body to stimulate our immune system to produce antibodies. Now, the mRNA comes in and then it produces a spike, the protein spikes, stimulates the immune system, and then to produce antibodies. It's a cascade of reaction, but at the end of the day, the objective is to produce antibodies. And now, the RNA does not in any way actually alter our genetic material or our DNA. So that's how the RNA vaccine works. And the 2 famous ones that has been rolled out is the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. It should be arriving in our shores somewhere this year, hopefully, Yeah. And then we also have 3 other types of vaccine. Just very quickly, we have the Oxford by AstraZeneca, and we have the Sputnik vaccine from Russia. So now these are known as the viral vector vaccines. So now basically what it is an engineered virus that's used to manufacture the vaccine. It's given to us to stimulate our immune system to produce antibodies. Same mechanism. And then we have the protein vaccine. So now that is just a fragment of the protein from the coronavirus is used to manufacture the vaccine. Again, given to us, stimulate our immune system, produce antibodies. And the last one is actually known as the attenuated vaccine, which is basically a weakened, inactive form of the virus itself, used to manufacture the vaccine, given to us, stimulate immune system to produce antibodies. And China has one that's already been rolled out. India has as well. So it's known as, the China one is known as Sinovac, and the India vaccine is known as Covaxin by Bharat Biotech. So again, the whole emphasis is for us to have the antibodies to combat the virus, since it's just absolutely new to the human body. I hope it's simplified enough and medical jargon.
But I think I mean before we for the James, and I bring to for the James attention, the whole research, that's the conversation in Catholic circles, whether aborted fetuses had been used in the research, that's been the since December, that's been in the minds of many theologians. Can we take the vaccine or not? But one of the things that I keep getting, or at least I hear, in terms of, people are afraid because of the urgency with which these vaccines have been rolled out. Because I don't know how long does it take normally for a vaccine to go through the stages of test, and this is kind of an accelerated kind of a process. So I guess that's the fear of a lot of people, isn't it, Sharon?
Yes, absolutely right, Father, because it takes about 2 years at least for a vaccine to be rolled out. But here we have got them within 6 months. So they actually go through the preclinical phase, which is tested on animals, mice and monkeys. Then it heads on to the phase 1 of the trials, which are tested on humans, just a very small population. Then phase 2 is basically where you have about hundreds of participants. Phase 3, thousands of participants. And then it goes to FDA for approval, and then third-party approval, and so forth. So actually, FDA's requirement at phase 3 is that it requires only 3,000 participants at that phase. But the Pfizer actually had 30,000 participants, and Moderna had 44,000 participants. So, and also with the special permission called EUA, Emergency Use Approval, which has been obtained from the US and from the European Union, so which is why the vaccines have been rolled out a lot faster, but no corners have been cut and no steps have been skipped. So they have followed the guidelines and all that needs to be followed carefully too. And and all the data is actually online, the clinical studies and the results of every single papers.
Well, I mean, I guess, when anything that is accelerated is always looked at, anything that you produce, for that matter, if you produce a car within 6 months, it's always looked with suspicion, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
the car and where the car comes from and who's producing it. I mean, this is an everyday conversation. But among Catholic ethicists, I think this is what, James, I think we were talking about, in terms of the source, the origin, in terms of whether it's come from, fetal cell lines, what is the church's position? I mean, in this area, this is not something that's been discussed just now, much earlier.
Yeah. I'll just begin adding on a comment to the fast production. I would say desperate times, desperate measures. We also have to see it in that context. It's not a typical situation. This pandemic has claimed millions of lives and so many people affected. So desperate times, desperate measures. So that's one thing. The second thing is when we look at the side effects, possible side effects, I think we also have to weigh up the side effects of getting coronavirus. It's no small thing that there are very serious side effects, death and many other problems. So it's a very serious issue we're dealing with. I think that needs to be borne in mind. It's not just should I take a virus with side effects or not? No, I think it's good to weigh up. Should I take a virus with possible side effects versus the known side effects of having COVID? In terms of, the origin of the vaccines, of course, we heard there's different types of vaccines, and one of the questions that comes up is, what is the origin? Where did they come from? The church previously addressed this question because, in summary, when they want to do research and development and testing on a vaccine, of course, it needs to be tested to clear the tests and hurdles to make sure that it's going to be safe. So in those different moments of research and production, they would normally use cells to grow the virus in. And worldwide, what's happened is there is a cell line. There is a group of cells that continues to grow and can be shared between laboratories. And if you trace back the origin of these cells, there were some abortions occurring in the 1960s, 1970s, and many of these cell lines came from those abortions. So the first thing we know is very clear, then the church will give a no to abortion, because as we shared at the beginning of our discussion, Clarence, the sacredness of life, you cannot violate that sanctity of life. So that is clear, and that's not in question. But the question here is not, is abortion wrong or not? That's not the question, because the answer is clear, that the initial event was wrong. The question is the cooperation in something that is wrong for specific reasons, or you could say for emergency reasons. Do the emergency reasons we have justify the cooperation in a wrongdoing which was in the 60s and the 70s? And the church has specifically looked at that question, and in December of last year, it gave its answer. And it announced that where there are no other vaccines available, either for the availability, costing, there can be different reasons, where those other vaccines are not available, it is morally acceptable to take these, what are called ethically tainted vaccines. And that's the clear decision of the church. And the reasons for it, they would say, is that when you're taking that vaccine, you're not saying that you agree in any way with the initial wrong event. In fact, your cooperation, I don't agree with the initial event, but it was so far away or so long ago historically that my participation or cooperation is remote. So I'm not agreeing with the initial event, this event that happened in the past, but because of the extraordinary reasons that we have, the grave reasons or proportionate reasons, which are this virus is causing a pandemic, many have died, many are sick, the hospitals are overloaded. If I don't take it, I might transmit the infection to others. For all these reasons, the church has clearly announced it is morally acceptable to take the vaccine. And the last thing, just in this point, at least for the moment, is the vaccine itself does not contain the aborted fetal cells. This is a type of fake news or scare news, and it's incorrect. I'm sure Dr. Sharon can confirm that, but medically speaking, there's no cell from the aborted fetus in the vaccine. Otherwise, the Vatican pronouncement would have been different. So I think we have to have a little bit of trust. If, for example, we say we are Catholic, we can also have a little bit of confidence in the pronouncements of the Vatican on these issues.
I think there were two pronouncements in December from the Vatican. One came from the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, and then the one later towards the end of December was from the COVID task force in the Vatican. But it's something that's not recent. I mean, I remember in 2005, the Pontifical Academy for Life had already talked about, about vaccines prepared from aborted human fetuses. So the conversation that the church is having just now because of COVID, it's a conversation that the church has been having in terms of these challenges and difficulties. But I guess that's where, of course, this evening, what we are talking is, of course, we are not addressing the scientific issues because probably we don't have enough data to address those things. But we are talking from a Catholic moral teaching perspective of the church. Where does all this lead to, or where does this all stand? Because James, if you remember, I mean, it's the same. Alfonso talks about the principle of cooperation and we have used, somehow we're all connected. It's how closely connected or do we cooperate with an evil act, or how distant. Does play an important part in terms of understanding the morality of the situation. I mean, I remember things like, there's direct cooperation, there's indirect cooperation, there's remote cooperation, there's material cooperation. But the way you're saying this one is, it's so remote, that that we didn't have a choice, or we didn't have a say in the first decision. Is it? I mean, is this how we look at it, right? I mean, I guess.
Yes. I think what I've noticed, there's some confusion among certain Catholics between where the original wrongdoing and our participation in something that's wrong. So, for example, you hear comments like, so that means the church is saying it's okay to kill the unborn child, or to save ourselves, we can do that. I think they shouldn't oversimplify the issue. I think the Vatican has looked clearly into this, and what it's trying to tell us is, look, the original wrong is wrong, and nothing's going to right a wrong. And that's not in question, and we're not debating that, and we don't need to debate it. But the participation in the wrong event, as we said, there's different classifications. So it could be formal or material, which means I share the intention or not. It could be immediate. It could be proximate or remote. There's a lot of sub-classifications within cooperating with a wrong action. And in this case, the determination is that it's a remote or very remote participation. And one of the things I find difficult is if the person is not able to value a pronouncement from the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, and they don't take it on its merit for where it's coming from, because they watched the video on Facebook, I find it's very hard to dialogue with such a person, because there's no, like you could say, no moral hierarchy. So the pronouncement of the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith is totally irrelevant for me because I read something on Facebook. Okay. So I would say that you're not, in that sense, you're not really being adherent to the Catholic teaching because they've made the pronouncement already. So if we don't have some sort of hierarchy in the truths, in the end, it creates a lot of confusion. It becomes very messy.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I'm sure Sharon in her own profession, before a patient comes to see you, the patient has already Googled and found all the possible answers and telling you, isn't it? I mean, do you see that in your own profession?
Yes, Google Doctor is more famous than all of us. Yeah. Yeah. So they already have their list of differential diagnoses when they come in and what treatment plan you like. So sometimes I do get dictated, but the large majority of them are fairly fine.
Yeah. But James, I think this is where I think I wanted to also kind of talk about this whole idea of protection of life. It is not just me holding a higher moral ground on somebody else, but because we live in a community, that I also have a responsibility to protect someone else's life, and not just my own. I think in that sense, I guess that's where, I mean, the Vatican also talks. The document talks about being in solidarity with humanity.
Yes.
That that you also look after other people. So in such a situation, there seems to be a higher value in terms of the vaccine or the if the vaccine is tainted. I mean, you rightly said, I mean, we are not condoning it. We are not saying it's right. And of course, I mean, even the document says that if there's an alternative, then we should ask for an alternative. If it's possible. And I don't even know, Sharon, I don't even know. Let's say when it comes to Malaysia, do I have a choice to say, no, I don't want this, I want the other one? You might be just on a list, and you get what you're given. That's about all. So the whole principle of solidarity, human solidarity, is something that maybe at this situation also calls for a reflection from us. What do you think, James?
Yes, but I think that, I mean, some of the answers might be, I'm in conscience, I am free to make a choice. The first thing I'll share about that is that the choice we are making to vaccination is a good. In other words, it's like saying, I'm free in conscience to help the poor or not. Yeah, but to help the poor is a good thing. So we are trying to, I say, encourage an option for something that is good. And in my personal choice of conscience, no man is an island, no woman is an island. We are social beings. So my choices also have to take into consideration the others. And that's why in the church teachings, there's such an emphasis on the common good. The common good, that I have to also think of the good of others. And I think that's what would be expected probably in any country by a reasonably responsible citizen. It's not just to be concerned for oneself, one's own health, but also for the health and well-being of the others. That's why there's that emphasis on the common good.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, this principle, is as good as the principle to protect life, because my action is also, it contributes to the protection of human society, or humanity for that matter, for everyone. Of course, I mean, like you say, we talk about the common good and solidarity. I mean, even the document says that, I mean, you cannot oblige, or no one is morally obligated, because there's also the matter of conscience,
Yes.
and if you choose not to, I mean, then there are subsequent actions that one has to take also in order to protect others, and I think that's something that I guess we have to start thinking also, that, like you say, I mean, no man is an island, no woman is an island. We are all now, like, in different parts of the world, and we don't even communicate with what, I mean, we don't have face-to-face or physical connection. So what is the common good in this situation then?
I think one thing that's important as well is the decision of conscience is not like a starting point, but it should be an end point, in the sense that I have to do my homework. So some things I think would be important is a person to come to a reasonable decision of conscience. For example, I'd be a little bit worried if they spent so much time reading news and watching videos that they didn't have any time left to even read what the church said. I think that would not really be good homework. And in sometimes the sources that people are using, I mean, was it church approved? Is it even scientifically approved? I'm just sharing that because in some cultures and countries, they're a little bit more prone to just receive anything in an acritical fashion. And some of the things that people have been sending me, I wonder why on earth they're even bothering to watch it. It's so scaremongering and so reactionary. It's like, oh my goodness, it sounds like a soap opera, the way this is being presented. And it's not a Catholic approved site. It's not a diocesan approved site. It's hardly even scientifically approved. Yet the person is using that for their decision of conscience. So I would put a big question mark there. I think it's good to do what the Lord did sometimes. When he heard that the daughter of Jairus had died, he knew it was fake news and he ignored it. So sometimes we need to fast a little bit on our sources and at least make sure that we've read the main church pronouncement. And then I can have more confidence that my decision of conscience is coming from a well-formed conscience.
Yeah. I guess the information is out there. It's the question of to be discerning enough to choose the right information, because there's a whole information explosion that, we keep getting messages from different people with different, this, that, I'm sure, I mean, every morning you open the newspaper, or at least you turn on your phone, and you get, people who have not been sleeping throughout the night sending out messages from one to the other. But I think it's about being discerning enough to choose the right ones. And I think that's the most important thing. And I think, I think the two documents that have come out are very down to earth, are very, very practical. And it addresses all the issues, actually, about, conscience, about, is there a moral obligation that you should take the vaccine? I mean, in no way our conversation this evening is either saying you should or you shouldn't, isn't it? I mean, we're not saying one or the other. We're just trying to understand some of the difficulties people are facing, I guess, having to read all this and not knowing what to choose or what to do in such a situation. I mean, I'm sure, Sharon, you also read, the paper. I mean, people say, oh, somebody took this vaccine and they all died or something like that. It's kind of sometimes, you without knowing, maybe that person had, other conditions that, contributed, so it's like, a natural a natural conclusion by reading the headlines and everybody. Oh, okay, so yeah. But how is it in the UK, James? I mean, how is it being rolled out in the UK? I mean, I know that. I mean, how is it happening? We were talking about it earlier. I mean, it's not about who can afford it, but there's a system, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that the system in itself is quite moral because it's done by need. So, for example, at the moment, they're just finishing off the over 80-year-old group, so over 80s. So they've done, I think, like 92%. They haven't quite managed the rest because some of those care homes, for example, there's coronavirus in there, so it's not so easy to access. So it's not going to be because of your position. I can think of some countries where it's because of your position, or whether you're rich, or whether you have influence, or whether you know doctors. And here, it cannot be like that. So it's by need, and it's being done by age category. So over 80s, and I'm going to start the over 70s soon. So the person receives a letter and then goes for vaccination. So I think it seems quite noble. This is also a concern for the common good, thinking in the good of all and doing it in an orderly fashion. You're not allowed to jump the queue, as I said, because of your title, position, money, but because of your need. We could say clinical need. So I find that quite noble, the vaccination, like the order. I hope other countries also could follow that kind of basis.
I guess we also realize that maybe, smaller countries, poorer countries will struggle with this, when they get it and when it's rolled out. It's because there's a great need at the moment, isn't it? I mean, everybody is clamoring for it. Every country is, whether accessibility, these are things that, perhaps we should be concerned about, whether the poor, the vulnerable will get it, and I think these are Catholic moral questions that really we should be talking about, and sometimes I think, whether the Vatican has made it clear about, fetal cell lines, what is it, but maybe the conversations that we should be having is about, it's about accessibility. Will everyone get it? I mean, I try to imagine the Philippines, I mean, or even for us, in Sabah and Sarawak in the interior, will they have the access to vaccines? That's going to be a great challenge. And and the other worry is that it's a great opportunity for anybody who wants to profit from this situation. Also, is that the possibility is there, isn't it? Sharon, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, we're going to have overnight billionaires in our country, actually. With the many middlemen involved in the transactions of the vaccine.
Yeah, I think these are very important moral questions that that we should be taking up and having a conversation. That human misery shouldn't be an opportunity for someone else's profiting, isn't it? Yeah, sorry, James, you were saying something.
Yes, I agree with you, Clarence, because sometimes the issue of whether the vaccines are ethically tainted or not, of course, it's a primary concern. And the danger is when it becomes the only concern. So it takes all the headlines and all the attention, and it's like you're so focused there, you somehow you don't notice the enemy coming in the back door. So issues about economy, for example, the corruption in our societies will mean that the distribution of the vaccine, the main moral issue will not be whether it's tainted or not. In fact, it will be the issue of corruption. So one of the things that's important, I think, especially in the Catholic vision, is a holistic moral approach. And not only to be so focused on one detail, no matter how important it can be, but it shouldn't cloud or overshadow the other moral concerns, like accessibility to the vaccine. For example, in the UK, another group they're trying to give attention to is prisoners. So I don't know if we, even in the conscience of the ones who are so concerned about this ethical detail and that, did they think of that group? So I found that somehow it was very encouraging for me to know that, for example, in the UK, they're really giving attention to the prisoners. I can think of some places where I've been a missionary, where I think the prisoners might be the last people on earth to get the vaccine because some people have such a negative opinion of them. That can be immoral, that type of reasoning. So, yeah, I think it's important to focus on important issues, but not lose the other important moral issues surrounding vaccination.
Yeah, I think that can be very myopic. Is the way you look at things. You have a little this blindness that you forget there are other concerns that we should be worried as church. I guess we should be concerned about as ethicists. We should be talking about all the other things. Like Sharon said, overnight billionaires. Yeah, it's a real challenge. But I mean, James, we also have always had this question about if someone decides not to. I mean, for example, you don't want to accept. Yeah, would that be like akin to? I mean, almost. I don't know. I mean, of course, mortality rates in Malaysia, I mean, comparatively are not high. I think. I mean, not saying that these lives don't matter. I'm not saying that either. But compared to many other countries, but would it be akin to to suicide? I mean, if you don't accept the vaccine, would that be something that we should be considering talking about? I mean, we always talk about when people don't want to accept certain treatments,
Yeah.
apart from vaccines. I mean, in general.
Yeah, I think we'd have to bear in mind our previous discussion about conscience and freedom. I think what's worth remarking again is how did the person come to that decision? So what's their thoughts and I mean, you don't just come up with a decision not to vaccinate, but what is your reasons why? So I think you'd have to really be clear to discern. I mean, there might be some medical reasons, for example, some categories of persons who are immunosuppressed, whose immune system is not functioning because of, for example, chemotherapy or some other reasons. They may not medically be able to take it. So that person could be making a good option medically and morally. So I think what's important if you make that decision no is why. What is your reasons? In the same way as if you say yes, you have to have reasons. So it's not just to say no, but why? Because as I said, perhaps your presupposition could be wrong. I think we should not be naive. Our presuppositions could be incorrect. For example, we mentioned some already. If you think, because you heard that there are aborted cells in the vaccine, and there aren't, the tainting is not a medical cellular tainting, it's a moral tainting. But you could be confused about that and say, I'm not going to take it, because you have the wrong premise. So I think it's what we're sharing is, of course, in conscience, you have to make a decision. Of course, it could be determined that it's no. Of course, that's the whole point of the decision making. But you should also know your reasons. Why are you saying no? And some of the conversations I've heard, some of the no's that I have heard they would have to revisit their premises if they followed this type of discussion, and probably they would have to review their decision, because sometimes the premises could be wrong. And of course, teaching tells us if you do make a no, then you are still responsible for your health, the health of others, and you need to take appropriate measures. So the church contemplates that some people will say no in good conscience. It's in the documents, and it will tell you what to do if you make a no in good conscience. But make it in good conscience, not a misinformed conscience or a badly formed conscience.
Yeah, I think that's the struggle. I guess people get information bits and pieces from everywhere, and you do not know what, and you try to make sense out of it, and finally it's a kind of a warped conscience. Basically, you don't have the objectivity to make the right decisions, and I think that's the challenge. That's the challenge that and I think as Catholics we have this obligation to inform ourselves. And I think that's another concern that we should be talking about. That we shouldn't just sit back and expect everybody to tell us what is right, what is wrong, but you also take the initiative to inform yourselves and to understand as much as possible. I mean, as to what I mean, it's the same. I mean, any medication you take. I mean, Sharon. I mean, any medication that you prescribe. I mean, there's always a possible side effect. Isn't it? I mean, you look at in the leaflet, they always tell you possible side effect. Even a headache is a side effect, isn't it? I mean, but sometimes you consider between the benefits, the immediate benefits, and the future risk. How do you manage that? It's always something that we are doing constantly, isn't it? I mean, it's not just this situation.
Yes, Father. It's about weighing out the benefit and the risk, and if the benefits actually outweighs the risk, then I think we should, But then again, in Malaysia, the Ministry of Health has not come up with any circular on the mandatory take of the vaccine. So there may be groups of people who may not want to take the vaccine, but at the end of the day, it's their decision if they want to take or not. Ministry of Health Malaysia has not sent out any circulars as yet for now.
Yeah, initially when the things when this pandemic started, we talked about herd immunity. We're talking of herd immunity. I think this has also created a herd mentality for people. Just picking up, all kinds of information from everywhere and making their own conclusions, like what James you were saying. Not going to the right source, but just being, I mean, this, as you can see, you just Google it on YouTube. You as much as you get 100 opinions for, you also get another 100 opinions against. So sometimes I think this is where, for us Catholics, we have the magisterium, the church, that guides us in times when we are in doubt, times when we are unable to get all the facts. The church acts as, magisterium simply, the church acts as mother, right? We've always been told that. And a mother is someone who nurtures, who cares for her children, and the church has the best interests of the believers, isn't it? I don't think there's anything else to kind of to even say that the church can't be pronouncing something that is bad for us.
Yes, I think that's. Perhaps we underline this, but I find it super important. It's like otherwise you just have like a moral hot pot. So I just put in the soup whatever I read, whoever says anything. The other thing we have to be careful of is sometimes before decision making, we can have a bias. For example, if I have a fear of vaccination, sometimes even all the objective truth doesn't convince me. Or if I'm prejudiced against it, I'll just tend to pick up what I like and ignore what I don't like. So that's why I really get worried by people who've read and listened to all sorts of points and opinions, and they have not had time to read the church teaching because they're so busy reading other things. It's like, hello, I think really we have to have a little bit of you are what you eat. And that's a very common expression, you are what you eat. And that's very important when it comes to forming our conscience. So there's really a duty. Of course, you have to follow your conscience, but the first thing is form it well first. So do your homework. And as some people have said, if you're objective and you do your homework, you try to read what the church says, you look at some counter opinions, that can be fine, but maybe not making them the main source of my moral diet. And then you should be able to come to a correct decision of conscience. So it's not that difficult, but I think it is very important to follow that kind of methodology and not just open up the internet and just watch and read whatever is shared to you, because you become totally lost.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that perhaps I think this is the reality today. A lot of people don't want to read lengthy church documents, James. They they want to give me 2-line answers. That's what everybody. I'm sure. I don't know. Sharon, you also encountered that. People, you ask them to go and read something. They say, they just give me a 2-line answer, and and they form their conscience based on 2 lines or the headlines. That's the most eye-catching thing, and then and form their own conscience. And I think that's a very important point, that an informed conscience. I think that's the thing that we all need, an informed conscience, to get in the right place, to be able to do. So I think these are some of the things I think we talked about this evening. In terms of, I'm sure people want to know, a lot of things about how Malaysia is going to roll it out, and I don't think there's much information yet. As far as I don't know if there is. In terms of there's a lot of news we read, but people want to know who will get it first. Do I have to sign up, etc., etc. I guess these are all things that people will have to wait and share, and there's a little more clarity for us in Malaysia.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think it also
preliminary.
Yeah, Sharon.
Yeah, the preliminary directives that have come out is that it's for the frontliners, the healthcare providers, the police, and the army, and then the subsequent batches. They haven't. That part has not been, clarified yet by the ministry, as to which age group, target groups, and whether it's nursing homes first. And so that part has not been ironed out yet. But we only know very, very preliminary information that for the healthcare, the army, and the police.
So priests are not frontliners, James. People are waiting to come back for mass and have their confession. So maybe we should be signing up to be frontliners, James.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's part of the work is frontline.
Yeah. Spiritual doctors.
Yes. Even you're in the front line of the moral battle and all the questions.
Yeah.
I think they are physically they are in the front line. If you are going to give the sacraments, the anointing of the sick, the Eucharist, of course, it depends on the context, the country, the rules. But yeah, in a lot of situations, they really will be in a frontline position.
I guess those who need it the most. I would think, those who are treating, those who are fighting this pandemic, they will priority. I mean, I suppose in any country too. Then the more vulnerable people will probably get it, and the rest of us, I guess, we just have to take precautions. I mean, I keep saying to people, wearing a face mask or a shield is actually an act of charity. I even jokingly said it's part of the works of mercy now in this situation, to wear a mask to protect someone else. Some people are just so oblivious to it. They think, oh, it doesn't happen to me. It doesn't happen to me. I think that there are far greater moral challenges than just looking at the source of. I'm not saying it's not important, like you say, Father James. I mean, not that they are not important, but we have to see it also in a macro perspective, in line with other issues that are also that should concern us, and should be as we should be as concerned about these other things as much as we are concerned about the origins of the vaccine, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it's what we shared. Sometimes you notice the person picking up on a detail, which can be important, and then totally forgetting the rest of their moral life. For example, the way they handle their economy, whether they pray or not. So no discussion about that. It's not contentious at all. All I'm focused on is this moral detail. I think we have to be careful with that, to keep that holistic approach. And as we shared, this issue of whether a vaccine is tainted or not, the church is not ignoring that question. That's what the recent pronouncements have been. If you can get a vaccine that's not ethically tainted, it's like, of course, take it. That's the number one priority. But it also knows that for practical reasons, perhaps that vaccine is not available in your context or country. So if you can get a vaccine that's not ethically tainted, that's not ethically irreproachable, then you should take that vaccine. If there are other vaccines that are tainted, you may not have a choice but to take that, and that's why the church is. So there is a kind of hierarchy in the ethical evaluation of the vaccines. Sometimes the information is not easy to find. There are some institutes, for example, there's an institute called the Charlotte Lozier, which is Lozier. The Charlotte Lozier Institute does a lot of research to tell you what is the origin of the vaccine and give it like an ethical rating. And that information is used in the preparation of the church statements. Because remember, when the church makes a statement, some people have a division, like there's a church statement and then there's like a medical statement. But when the church pronounces on a medical issue, it's consulting virologists, it's consulting doctors, it's consulting epidemiologists. I mean, it does its homework before it makes a pronouncement. And in those pronouncements, the church has been referring to that information from the Charlotte Lozier Institute. So if anyone was particularly interested in the origin of the vaccines, what's their like ethical profile, they can consult the information available through that institute on the internet.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that that one has to remember. The church also doesn't make pronouncements in isolation or being oblivious to what's happening around. I mean, the clear example is the Pontifical Academy for Life. I mean, there's so many consultants there from so many different fields who's actually advising the Holy Father and the congregations, and these are top-notch people in their fields who are advising, and not just your fly-by-night scientists, but these are top-notch people who are advising. I think that's an important thing that people should remember also, that the church never makes a pronouncement in isolation. It's always to help, isn't it? I mean, the church, as I said earlier, church is the mother that nurtures, the mother that helps, and the mother that accompanies. I mean, it's just like, any child. I mean, at a threat of a danger, where does the child run to? Very often it's, I mean, I don't say it's always the mother, but sometimes the mother or the father, but and I think that's the kind of attitude that I guess we too have to take on when we are confronted sometimes with moral dilemmas. Where do we run to? Certainly not the internet, or but to
Or if you go to the internet, type in Vatican Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. There's documents there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I don't want to hold on to you. And James, I think it's almost your lunchtime. Time with your family, and Sharon also. I'd like to go. I mean, thanks for this conversation. I mean, I think I know there are lots of people who would like to ask questions, I'm sure, but we said that this is people will get to eavesdrop on a conversation between us. So I mean, people who have lots of questions, we're saying that go look for the right places to look for the information. Look at church documents for Catholics. Look at what's out there. Don't just narrow yourself to WhatsApp messages that are being forwarded every morning, but like 100 things. But to read up and to be informed and be informed. And I think that, and at the end, I think, James, I think this is what the last document that came out right at the end. It says, if you do choose not to, for whatever reasons, then you have a moral obligation to protect others, isn't it? I mean, that's very clear. Yeah. So in no way the church is compelling anyone or saying that you should, but with good conscience, informed conscience, that you have got all the information that you require, and you've studied it, and you have asked people, and at the end of it all, you still think that you don't want to take it, then there's another obligation that comes in.
Yeah, the church also. I mean, I would agree with what we're sharing. You're only as good as your sources. I think that's really one conclusion we can draw. You're only as good as your sources, and to really make sure and to be a little bit more discerning and not just eat everything that's thrown at me. That is a good recipe for making yourself a little bit sick, morally speaking. You have to choose well your sources and try and put a little bit of hierarchy of the truth. Otherwise, everything is relative. So the Pope made a pronouncement, and the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith studied it, and they got the experts, and they studied it and did a big investigation, But then I got a tweet today, so that negates that. I mean, if we're going to work like that, I would say it's moral anarchy. So part of me being Catholic, for example, is that to try to be faithful, or at least know, being faithful, great, but at least to know what the church says. And it cannot be that I'm looking at so many other things and I don't know what the church is saying on these important issues. That's one. The second thing, just to remember that when it talks about the tainted vaccines, it's not just to receive them and not make any response. The church also would underline that we have a duty as church. And many ethical institutions are already doing this. They're already woken up, maybe long before we have individually, that we need to speak to the pharmaceutical companies. We need to tell them that we cannot be using these cell lines with these tainted origins. We need to be looking for new ways. And I think the pharmaceutical industries are starting to feel this pressure, which is relatively new, to look for cell lines of a more ethical origin. Then we have a duty in conscience also to make that objection known. And the church is trying to do that. Some ethical bodies are trying to do that. So we're also part of that voice of the church. That's another way of responding to the issue of the tainted vaccines.
I mean, we've been talking about the church documents. Maybe I just want to call out the documents so that whoever's eavesdropping on us would know what these documents are. I think that the first one, I mean, the earliest one that came, it was in 2005, I think, but the more recent one was 2020, 21st of December, 2020. If anybody wants to look, it's for the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith. It's entitled Note on the Morality of Using Some Anti-COVID-19 Vaccines. Note on the morality of using some anti-COVID-19 vaccines. came out 21st December, just before Christmas. And on the 29th of December, the Vatican COVID-19 Commission. So there is a commission in the Vatican, James, Sharon. I mean, if people are thinking the Holy Father is sitting there and dwindling his thumbs and say, what shall I write this morning? There is a whole commission. They're studying and asking expert advice. And there is one that come out 20 points for a fairer and healthier world that was issued on the 29th of December. So if people are looking for documents to read, these are the two ones. But the earlier one that came out in 2005, it was moral reflections on vaccines prepared from aborted human fetuses. Yeah, but that was in a more generic sense. I think they were referring to other vaccines, but not specifically to COVID-19. So if people are listening in to us this evening, if you want to look at what the church has pronounced, the first two that came out last year, and maybe if you want to read more, to go back to 2005. Yep. So I better let you all go. Thanks, James. Sharon, any closing words that you want to say?
There's been quite a number of questions as well on how we can actually look after ourselves and our families. So, besides the usual precaution of wearing face masks, social distancing, and the adequate hand hygiene, vitamin C, vitamin D3, and zinc, and all these have sufficient clinical papers on boosting our immune system to stay healthy with our family, enabling to manage the symptoms of COVID should we contract the virus. So these are sufficient for us. And I'll just suggest everyone stay safe. Let's follow the guidelines and the SOPs that has been set by our government. And when the vaccines are rolled out slowly, as we spoke earlier about the different types of vaccines, so gradually it will be rolled out in Malaysia. And then what's available according to the different categories, we would all receive them. But again, it's up to every individual whether they want to take the vaccine or not. So you can make a sound decision based on the information that has been given by Father James, with the materials as well that they've just mentioned. And for the scientific part, I would strongly suggest to visit the CDC website. It's got all the information on all the clinical trials of all the vaccines, as well as the adverse effects, the isolated adverse effects in different countries, as well as the short-term side effects. The information are all available on the CDC website. It's a really good source, as well as FDA website.
So CDC as in Center for Disease Control, right? So I hopefully they, yes. Because if you talk CDC, in the Google, they might get something else, and it could be reading something else.
Oops, yeah.
So the US Center for Disease Control. I think there's a lot of information there. Thanks, Sharon, for joining us for this conversation. Yeah, James, any words? The next time when you come on, I'm going to get you to play the bagpipe. I didn't realize that you play the bagpipe.
Yes, I'm learning. Let's say it could be a good way to end, because people will cut the chat if they're overstaying their welcome. So I'm learning some songs. It's a wonderful instrument.
Right.
Next time.
On the next show, we'll get him to play the bagpipe.
Yes.
Right.
Amazing
Thanks.
grace.
Yeah. Maybe, James, you want to say a prayer and we close this conversation before we retire for the night and you get a siesta, I guess.
Yeah. Yes. Let's place ourselves in the presence of the Lord, who we pray has been guiding us, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we pray for all the victims of COVID, all those who have died, all those who are sick. We give you thanks for the response of so many frontline workers. We also give thanks to you, Holy Spirit, for inspiring the medical profession, the researchers, pharmaceutical companies, to come up with an antidote in the form of the vaccines. Help us, Lord, to be able to be in dialogue with one another, to listen to the views of others. And thank you so much for the gift of your teaching expressed through the magisterium and the teaching office of the church. Mother Mary, place our lives in your hands. May we never get tired of protecting and defending life as you did. All this we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father,
Amen.
the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
I hope to see you in Malaysia soon, James, when you come back and when all this is settled. And
yes,
maybe the three of us will get a cup of coffee then. In the meantime, you have to make your own coffee, I guess.
A cup of coffee without a face mask and a shield and distancing, yes.
That's right. This is how we used to before, and hope we are able to do that. Just for the benefit of all those who are listening into this conversation. Anyway, if you're eavesdropping on our conversation, this is a conversation that you don't have to go to confession, that you eavesdrop on somebody else. So this is something that has been shared with everyone. Hopefully, you got some information that you have been asking. We're not able to take all the questions, but hopefully this kind of acts as a catalyst for you to go and look up and read up, get yourself informed also, and to know what's in the days to come. Let's be united in prayer also. Some are wondering whether we do a weekly show on a Saturday morning. This is an extraordinary show because to time it together with Father James, tomorrow we'll still have our morning show. As we prepare to enter into the season of Lent, we're going to talk a little bit about Lenten campaigns. What happens in Lent or during Lent, and the Lenten campaigns that we all take part in. What is in store for this year? So do join us tomorrow morning at 10:30. We'll be live again to talk to Father Albert and his staff from the Office of Development on Lenten campaign this year. So until then. Thank you very much, everyone. To all our listeners, good night. Father James, have a good day. Enjoy your stay with your family. Regards to your mom and dad, your brother.
Sharon also.
Eat more, get rounder before you get back to the Philippines. I'm sure your mom is spoiling you with some nice food also at home, and she must be enjoying the company. Thank you very much. Stay safe, everyone. God bless.
God bless. Bye-bye.
confidence, I fly to you today. I'm sinful, weak, and sorrowful, but strong enough to pray.
Oh, Mother of our Savior, I know you'll hear my prayer. I know that you will answer me. I know I'll feel your care.
Remember Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to you was